You should understand that relying on drugs is the worst way to cure an illness or gain a healthy body. The best way is to solve the problem at its root. Ancient China did not have our modern medical chemistry, and so they had to develop other ways of adjusting the body's water and fire. We can learn much from them. And today we plan to do that. This is a quote from the book Muscle Tendon Change, Bone Marrow Washing by our teacher, Dr. Yang Jwingming. Welcome to Chi Talks, where it's all about the energy. And if everything is made up of energy, then we have a lot to talk about. So let's get to it. Our topic for today is the role of herbs in Qigong, theory and application. Our guests are Gray Estrada and Jane Bothwell. And we'll be talking about the history of Qigong, Qigong theory, herbalism with Jane Bothwell, and 5-element theory with Gray Estrada. Gray is a Chinese medicine lifestylist specializing in a branch of Chinese medicine known as Yangsung, or life nourishment. And Jane Bothwell is a home-based community herbalist who has trained and inspired generations of students to live and practice the ancient craft of herbalism at Dandelion Herbal Center in Neyland, California. So Chinese herbalism can be traced back up to 7,000 years. And its legendary discovery is traced to a little bit of myth and legend, someone known as Sun Long, who's said to have introduced agriculture to his people. According to historian Sima Chen, he became fascinated and intrigued by the medicinal properties, and the art of medicine was born. However, it wouldn't be until centuries later that myth and fact would begin to be scientifically separated. Similar to other cultures, knowledge of the medicine man was described as superstition or old wives' tales by skeptics. It didn't help that the knowledge was passed down by word of mouth. Not much was written down. Primitive inscriptions were carved on turtle shells and animal bones. There were no peer-reviewed, scrutinized, nor tested controlled scientific experiments with double-blind placebo trials. And it took about 2,000 years for herbal practices to even be committed to writing and for the term herbal medicine to receive a written character. Yao means herb, Yiseng is doctor, and Bunsao is herbal medicine, loosely translated as plants of rigid stalks and grass-like plants. So the pharmacopoeia was not just plant materials, and it included staghorns as a tonic for renewal of youthful vigor, fossil bones and oyster shells as astringents, bear's gall and turtle shell as purgatives, or dried centipedes, scorpions, silkworms, and beetles, bat stung, tiger bones, minerals like realgar and arsenic sulfide mineral, brown mica, cinnabar ore, and clay. The waters do get muddy when we begin to inject spirituality into herbalism and lifestyle. I personally have Christian friends who take issue with Taoism and Buddhism, as they are taught that Jesus is the only one and Savior allowing us into the kingdom of heaven. We know that there have been witch hunts of herbal practitioners in the name of faith. In contrast, Barbara O'Neill, a controversial naturopathic doctor from Australia who runs Misty Mountain Retreat, cites scripture as she helps clients find wellness. In Genesis 1:29, it reads, "Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food." And from Psalm 104:14, "He causeth the grass to grow for the cattle, and herb for the service of man, that he may bring food out of the earth." Back to the Chinese sages, it was the teachings of Confucius and Lao Tzu who eventually aimed to codify and systematize philosophy, teachings, and practices to have and pave a path to salvation and spiritual destiny. This was about 600 BC. It was the Taoists known as Zenren, or real person, who spoke of mystical islands, or a particular mystical island of the Eastern Sea, where there existed an herb with the power to bestow immortality. Immortality, this surprisingly reminds us of the Christian desire for eternal life. Does this mean that the Eastern sages had the same questions, the same thoughts, abiding in the same mystery and seeking out communion with the supernatural, with the Creator? It's important to mention the Taoists because it was they that took the liberty to experiment with herbs in contrast to the Buddhists. Relative to the Buddhists, the Taoists were not as strict, yet both aimed to achieve enlightenment. Buddhists restricted things like meat and alcohol from their diet. The Taoists focused on longevity of the body because the longer that the body was healthy, the more lifespan they had to cultivate spirituality. Whereas the Buddhists generally disregarded the body's health in favor of focusing on the intangible. Ultimately, it was called the Way, the Tao. Taoists deal with the theory of cosmic law and structure, and man's place within that structure. Along that path, the two basic expressions of the Tao lay locked in their perpetual embrace: the positive, active, and even aggressive yang, and the negative, passive, receptive yin, their correlation and balance determining the universal order. Eventually, Neo-Confucian thought held that the human body was the micro of the macro, and in and of itself was its own small universe, the body as a small universe. In a universe where so much is out of the individual's control, we possess our own universe, which we have the mind, the potential to influence, possibly to control our small universe. So returning to the quote at the top of the show, where our teacher warned about relying on drugs for curing sickness or injury and encouraged us to solve the problem instead at its root. Let's remember that Qigong can be roughly translated to energy work, implying time and effort. Let's look at arthritis. Take that for example. From Dr. Yang Jingming's book, Chinese medicine and Qigong believe that the way to cure arthritis is to build the strength of the joints. So the patient is taught how to increase the qi circulation with slow, easy exercises, and how to massage the joints to strengthen them. These practices readjust the yin and yang balance, which allow the body to repair the damage and increase the strength of the joints. This happens gradually over time as one develops a new relationship to oneself and the area of symptomatic issue. And the story of a patient being taught movement is the common story of Chinese healing practice even from 4,000 years ago. The belief is to keep the forces of yin and yang in harmony. This is the duty of the physician, to restore equilibrium, restore balance, and any of the excess or deficiency. This is the main objective of the physician's endeavor. And this includes use of herbs, seasonal diets, acupuncture, moxibustion, and even movement medicine. We're talking about yin and yang balance in the body and the role of the physician. And this was to create the conditions to restore balance in the patient's body. Anything to add there?
I think that the message that you're stating is that I think healing from a Chinese herbal medicine Qigong practice is not reliant upon any one thing. So oftentimes we go to medicines as a cure, and it's changing in Western medicine too. We have physical therapy and all kinds of somatic healings, and so I wouldn't say that it's a Eastern-Western divide, but traditionally in Chinese medical practices, it's been a combination of movement with herbs and with meditation practices. And it's an encouragement of reconnecting with yourself, reconnecting with nature. And as opposed to maybe more historically in Western traditions, there's a lot of numbing, a lot of dulling of pain, of taking the pain away. Whereas when we engage in our practice, you say this to me, Javi, often, is that you got to sometimes make your pain your friend. And as in it informs you as a source of knowledge and information about what's going on. And a lot of times that those sensations that are unfamiliar or intense can be alarming and overwhelming to the senses when you don't know how to interpret those signals. They all get lumped in the same description of pain, whereas there's more nuances as you practice and do your own body movement practice, and you get familiar with those sensations that are intense, and learn how to moderate them to make them less intense so you can understand what's going on better. So actually pain can be a friend as opposed to something that you want to numb away and be disconnected from. And when you do that and you cut yourself off from pain, which might be an early signal to create a change in your life in some other way. If you cut that communication off, eventually at some point, your body is going to, what you say is scream instead of just talk to you. And at that point, you're at a critical moment. You're at a moment of crisis and need for larger, more invasive intervention. So in any case, so that's a great little historical background. We were studying out of a book our teacher handed us about the history of herbs in Eastern and Chinese history. And I think the take home of that intro piece is how to be artful with your healing, how to combine these different practices to address the unique universe of yourself. And so at this juncture, we then ask, so where does that leave us in our relationship with herbs? If we are not to look at any one substance as a magical fix-all, then what is an herb? And what can it do for us and how? What role can and do herbs play in our lives? And to help us take a look at these questions, we want to invite to speak with us herbalist Jane Bothwell. Jane is a practicing herbalist educator, hypnotherapist, and flower essence practitioner. She is dedicated to empowering people with the knowledge and wisdom necessary to use plants wisely as food, medicine, and spiritual support. With this learning comes a full appreciation of the bounty of creation and a greater ability and desire to care for oneself, one's family, and our universe. She brings 20 plus years of working with clients teaching herb classes and generally immersing herself in plants. Jane, thank you so much for being here with us.
It is my pleasure.
Can you start off, Jane, by telling us your personal story around herbalism?
Well, let's see. I think it's been many decades ago, and I think it started with gardening and starting to grow my own food. And actually before that was houseplants. And so when you look at that, it was basically connecting with the energy of plants, the energy through the houseplants, the energy through the garden. And then I was thinking about and introduced to using plants for healing on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level, which, of course, we're all doing all the time anyway, whether we're aware of it or not. Just the fact that we choose to have houseplants in our house is bringing the energy of healing of plants.
Jane, thanks so much for joining us today. I want to remind listeners, you're listening to Chi Talks on KMUD, and we're talking with Jane Bothwell. And so you're somewhat local, yes, and you offer classes?
Yes, I do. I'm just out of Arcata and Eureka up in Neyland, and I offer classes, which of course right now are virtual mostly, but I really enjoy teaching people how to put their weeds into their salad bowl rather than into their compost. It's exciting.
That's fantastic. Weeds to salad. So I
Yeah.
wanted to get back to your personal story and ask you, at the root, what does herbalism mean to you?
Well, I would say herbalism means to me connecting with plants. And it's a fairly broad in the way that I look at it. And I think that just connecting with plants is very healing. And you could go hone it in a little bit more with saying that herbalism was using plants for healing in different modalities, teas, tinctures, salves, liniments, and syrups, etc.
And how would you describe your connection to plants and herbs?
I would say that the most healing that I feel actually is being outside. And I feel that that is because of the connection to the plants that grow around. And I also take it many steps further by growing lots of plants and harvesting plants and making medicine from plants. But I think the real root of it is just being with the plants themselves.
So it's spending the time, kind of building a sensitivity to the energies they provide, and also the effect they possibly have on yours as well. It sounds like.
Yes, I would say so. Mm-hmm.
And so, this description talks about plants as food and as medicine, and then it also you venture into spiritual support. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I think when we look at what helps us feel good and what that would be nurturing to us, and I think that feeling good is generally connecting to spirit, however you perceive that, which can be very different for different people. But in my way of looking at it, I think it's all one thing. It's just looked at from different ways. And I think with herbalism, studying it, learning about the plants, connecting with the plants, really connects us to our environment and connects us to a place inside of ourselves that you could call spirit. And when people study herbal medicine, it inevitably changes their life, and in a very positive way. And one of the major things that it does, I think, is connects us. And I think one of the roots of disease that we have is we're disconnected. We're disconnected from our environment. We're disconnected from ourselves, from each other. And when you start to study plants and spend time working with plants, whether that's in nature and growing your own, or just whether that's herbs from the herb jars in the herb store, you start to realize the connection that you have and with all of creation. And when that happens, I see people become a lot more open and accepting and loving, and they are more nurtured and more healed and more whole.
Which we need in our world for sure. And I just been while I'm listening to you speak, I can get the sense that you have nurtured this connection over time. And tell me about how you went from having these house plants and understanding having them in just, have them around the house to having this deeper relationship to them.
Then from houseplants to gardening, I went to spending a lot of time in the wilderness and doing a lot of backpacking and hiking. And I think that really fosters connection to our world. And then I decided to start doing more formal studies, and I took Dominion Herbal College's correspondence course, which is out of Canada. And at that time, which was late 70s, early 80s, it was just kind of the beginning of the herbal renaissance. So there were not the myriad of choices that there are now for studying herbalism, but I was blessed to find the California School of Herbal Studies in Forestville in Sonoma County. And so I came out there and studied for years and then became part of the staff at that school, and then moved up here to Humboldt County and started my own school.
That's quite the journey. And I wanted to ask you then, as we launch into two topics that came up when I spoke with you earlier in preparation for this show. You mentioned to us adaptogens, and I'd like to maybe start with adaptogens and have you speak a little bit about this category of herbs.
Adaptogens are a very popular category now, which is one reason, Nona, that I thought we might mention those. And adaptogens simply help us adapt. And so we all have a lot of adapting that we do all day. We all have numerous stresses that we deal with in different ways at different times. And so adaptogens are herbs that are very nourishing to the body, to the spirit. They really help to replenish. The way that I look at it is that our body is all the time trying to be its healthiest and to do its best job to be in balance and in harmony. And the herbs really help support that. And so different herbs like nettles, very simply stinging nettles, which we have growing all around here, is a really good example of an adaptogen. It's an herb that's very nourishing, it's replenishing, it has no negative side effects besides the fresh plant giving you a little sting every now and then. But taking it internally is a very replenishing for the body. And there's numerous other herbs and that are very helpful too. Eleutherococcus or Siberian ginseng is a plant that's a great adaptogen. Our local Avena sativa or Avena fatua, which is our wild oat plant, is very nourishing and supportive. And so herbs and food really overlap quite a bit because our food, I believe, is our medicine too. But when we're working with herbs, we're maybe doing it a little bit more concentrated dose and making that appear to be more of a medicine for us.
Jane, well, first of all, I want to remind listeners, it's 9:27. You've got it tuned to K-Mud, and we're talking with Jane Bothwell, herbalist and teacher, and you're listening to Chi Talks with Javi and Nona. And Jane, we're talking about connection. We're talking about balance. In biology, the word is homeostasis. It's the state of steady internal physical and chemical conditions maintained by living systems. This is the condition of optimal functioning for the organism and includes many variables such as body temperature, fluid balance, being kept with certain preset limits. You just mentioned that adaptogens help us to adapt. And I would like to just kind of remind us and myself, and I think about when we talk about balance and connecting, I think about energy, I think about Qigong, and I think about the connection and how we're always exchanging energies. And there's our body, the small universe, is always seeking to find that balance, find the homeostasis, stay there and respond to external or internal stressors. And I wanted to ask you, in this certain time with the pandemic and the distancing, how it's possibly creating imbalance because it's quite abnormal, and we actually seek, connection, and we talked about the reoccurring theme of connection. Can herbalism help us to foster connection, sort of restore a balance as a result of distancing, which might create disconnection? Is that fair?
That's fair.
Great.
So, what I think about after you said that is a lot about the nervous system. And I think that is, if you want to isolate something, a system that's really affected a lot through this pandemic on many levels. And I think the lack of physicality around people and the lack of hugs. I hear so many people saying one of the things I miss the most is hugging my friends, and so I would look at then herbs like skullcap, which is a really wonderful herb for bringing strength and vitality into our nervous system. Herbs like chamomile, herbs like the wild oat that I mentioned earlier, that can help us to settle. And I think that when we settle into ourselves, we have a tendency to take more deep breaths, to stop maybe the mental chatter, to slow down, to look around, and to look at what could be the opportunities at a time like this. And I think that at this point, we have gotten far enough into this pandemic that people are beginning to do that a little bit more, instead of just thinking, when is this going to be over and when can I get back to my normal life? I think it's a very good reflection that's happening, that people are saying, whoa, how can I take more breaths and be more still and be more observant and really see what possibly can be silver linings that happen in any situation? And so by taking our herbs that can help us to take more breaths, be more still, and feel more centered in our lives, I think that gives us more opportunity for that perspective.
Herbs aiding breath. It's we like that. We've talked about breathing here a lot.
Thank you so much. That's great.
And I can hear in this that it's not just about the connection with each other here. It seems like the herbs help us connect to ourselves and to nature, and then able to open us up because we're in a better state to be able to engage in the connections we do have all the time. It's maybe it seems like we've disconnected, but in connecting with ourselves, maybe we're going to be able to connect even better. Is kind of what I think when I hear you speak about this settle into ourselves with the herbs.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
That's a beautiful picture.
When you started to mention connecting and hugging, I thought about heart medicine. What might you recommend?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Borage is a plant that will take over your garden once you plant it, which I think is beautiful. And so many people have borage in their gardens, and it's also, of course, available at your herb shops. And borage is for cheerful courage and strength and confidence, and it's a really beautiful heart herb. And so you can eat the borage flowers, you can steam and eat the borage leaves, you can make tea from it, you can make all sorts of medicinal preparations. Roses, of course, are just an amazing heart medicine. when you even look at energetically the tradition, we give roses when we want to express our condolences, we want to express our love. Roses are really honored in our culture in many ways, but roses also make a delicious tea, and they're really nice in the bath. And some more heart herbs would be hawthorn berries and hawthorn flowers, which we have a lot of wild hawthorn trees that grow around here in Humboldt. And those are really wonderful herbs for the heart as well.
Wonderful.
I'm happy to say I've actually connected with borage. It was gifted to us, and we grew it up on the mountain at the center. And it has these beautiful blue flowers. And I, drank some teas at one point. But I really enjoyed putting the flower in salads. Mm-hmm. We would do that in the summers.
Mm-hmm. And then with this mention of many different flowers, borage and rose and hawthorn, I'd like to transition maybe to talking about flower essences and ask you, what's the background of flower essences? What is it? And how did it come to be?
Well, in our recorded history, I'm sure it probably was to be before that, but in our recorded history, it was Dr. Edward Bach in England in the early 1900s. He was a physician, and he felt like he was just treating symptoms and not treating the cause of disease. And so he really was wanting to further his healing practice and his studies. So he studied homeopathy, which is a science that definitely treats more the root cause rather than symptoms. And he found that to be a lot more helpful in his practice than traditional allopathic medicine. But he felt like there was something else that he really had to offer that was helping to treat the core of a person. And he felt like if you treated the core of a person, and that oftentimes these disease would not even progress to a symptomatic phase if you treated what came first. And so he gave up his practice, the story goes, and went out into the fields of outside of London and laid under the stars and communed with the plants and came up with this system of healing called flower essences. And flower essences, like homeopathy, are a little bit harder for us to wrap our heads around because they are truly energetic medicine. And with flower essences, like let's say borage per se, you basically just take a few borage flowers, float them in water. And again, this is just a brief description. And then the vibrational energy of that flower is infused into the water. And then you bottle that water. And then you take literally a few drops. And so the idea is that water holds energy, which I think most people are aware of. And then it's holding the vibration of whatever plant material you are floating upon it. And then that's preserved with a little bit of brandy in a bottle. And then the person just takes a few drops. And then you are infused with the vibration of that plant. Now, of course, you can be infused with the vibration of the plant just by being with the plant. But many times we can't be with the plants that we want to be with or that are holding that particular vibration that our being would benefit from being infused with at that time. And so the Bach flower essences were the first set that I know of that were produced in our recent history. And then from there evolved the California Flower Essence Society, which is in Nevada City. And they prepare flower essences exactly the way that Dr. Bach prepared them. And they absolutely honor his tradition and his teachings. But they use more local flowers, and they're continuing to produce different essences using different flowers, whereas the box set is a complete set because obviously Dr. Bach is not living with us anymore, and so that set is finite to his lifetime.
And I got to experience flower essences with you, Jane, when we took your trip to Greece. My mom and I, my mom was taking Jane's course. Is it a 10-month course?
Yes.
Yes. And she learned all about making tinctures and liniments, and I got to be the happy recipient of all her homework assignments. And, when we went to Greece and took hikes to meet and greet the plant inhabitants of a small little island, remote, beautiful Ikaria. That hike took twice as long as it would have because we really did spend time with each resident and get to know them and really imbibe that energy that you're talking about. And you feel totally different, at the end of that. So I want to thank you, Jane, for speaking with us. I think we're coming to the end of our time here on Chi Talks with you. And I want to throw in a little curveball. I didn't mention this before, but one of the things that I really enjoyed in our class, our time together on our travels, is that you opened and closed many gatherings with a song, and I'm wondering if you would mind singing with us as we close out. Well, maybe we can tell folks first how they can connect with you, and then maybe think of what song to sing, and we can close out our talk with you that way. Is that all right, Jane?
Sure. Yeah, that's all right. So, I really enjoyed that trip, Nona, with you and your mom and all the other wonderful gypsy travelers. And I look forward to when we can start traveling again. And you can reach me at dandelionherb.com or at 707-442-8157. And
you have a flower essence class coming. What is it that is coming up? A class?
Oh, we have a remote class this weekend, which is the final class in our shamanic herbalism series, and it is with Rosia Alacan, who is from Ecuador, and she will be talking about the healing from the shamanic perspective with ritual and ceremony and the traditional uses of herbs from her country. So the information on it's an all weekend class, and the information will be on the webpage for anyone that's interested. And I have a beginning with herbs class that starts in the middle of September, which is basically a medicine-making class where we do tinctures, liniments, salves, syrups, teas, pills, and that will be virtual as well. So you'll be at home making your nettle tea while I'm on the screen teaching you how to do that.
Fantastic.
So a song. You want to sing a song? Do you have one in mind?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Any of them, just whatever pops
any
into
of
your
them
head.
that comes to mind. Okay. So let's do a call and refrain, and then you and Huffy can do the refrain. Should we try it?
Let's do it.
He's all
Fly
game.
like an eagle.
Fly
Your
like
turn.
an eagle.
Flying so high.
Flying so high.
Circling the universe.
Circling the universe.
On wings of pure light.
On wings of pure light.
Oh, Wichita-yo.
Oh, Wichita-yo.
Oh, yeah-yo.
Oh, yeah-yo.
Oh, Wichita-yo.
Oh, Wichita-yo.
Oh, yeah-yo.
Oh, yeah-yo.
It's So I want to thank you both for the opportunity for sharing on this radio program today. And thank you to the listeners. And, please be in touch with any questions, comments that you might have. And of course, special thanks to the plants and their being open with their abundant healing energy. And to all of us, and may we hold the vision strongly of peace, joy, and healing for all of creation. Thank you.
Mahalo.
Thanks so
Jane.
much.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon, Jane. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. I want to remind listeners, you got to tune to K-Mud, and we're doing Chi Talks right now with Javi and Nona, and we're bringing our next guest on, Gray Estrada. And Gray Estrada is a personal friend. We actually trained on the mountain together. So he's got quite the intro, quite the bio. And I just want to tell you guys a little bit about him. He is a Chinese medicine lifestylist specializing in a branch of Chinese medicine known as Yang Seng, or life nourishment. He holds a 4-year master's degree in traditional Chinese medicine and 18 plus years of martial arts training and therapeutic movement training in the United States and in Asia. He uses the classical branch of face reading as a starting point to understand personality traits, biological rhythms, and natural aptitudes of his clients. And he builds custom lifestyle guidance for them that includes seasonal eating guidelines, immune support, optimal environments, geography, movement arts, and meditative techniques. He owns Omni Health and Lifestyle. And Gray's going to talk to us about 5-element theory, Qigong theory, personal constitution, and then how to approach herbs. Gray, do I got you?
Yes, you do.
Right on. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Hello, Javi and Nona. Thanks for having me on again. So it sounds like you want me just to jump into the 5-element theory with the constitutional pieces and components, and also you said how to approach herbs and how to think about them.
Yeah, take it away.
Okay, great. So when we look at the 5-element theory, this is pivotal and central to Chinese medicine in general. So the 5 elements sometimes gets kind of a new age spin, and there's a lot of sensationalized ideas that come with it. But when we distill it down to its simplest form, the 5 elements were 5 phases or rhythms in the natural world that humanity was dependent upon. So if we can get behind that idea that we needed fire, earth, which is technically the soil, the terra firma of planet Earth. So fire, earth, metal, the capacity to make technology, the actual use of metal, the element itself. Metal, water, obviously, the planet is mostly water, as are we, and then wood, which is what we use for architecture, the basis for fire. So these 5 rhythms, at their most primordial survival level, we need these. The human organism has a relationship with these things since the dawn of time. So once we get behind that and we understand that the elements have relationship to us, the other piece of Chinese medicine is that this is a naturalistic and holographic philosophy, which the old adage says, as above, so below. There's lots of different ways to look at that. We have general relativity, which deals with the large bodies in the cosmos, and then we have quantum theory, which deals with the small, the micro. And they find relationship between the two. So as above, so below. We have these rhythms in our bodies, is the idea. If they are in the natural world and we see them because we are an extension of the natural world, these same rhythms are inside of us and we can't get away from it. They are quite literally built into our genetics. So the elements are a piece of us, and over thousands of years, the Chinese were very good at doing it systematically and looking at saying, okay, here's an element that behaves a certain way. Fire has a certain movement. It gives off heat. Which behavioral patterns, which thought patterns, and which organs relate to it. So over thousands of years, the Chinese were excellent at this. They categorized the 5 elements in nature and then said also the human being has a spectrum of fire. The human being has a spectrum of earth, metal, water, and wood inside of ourselves. And this kind of bridges us into this idea of what they call constitutional profiling. And in Chinese medicine, which we're not going to get into all of them, technically, if you look at the classics, they say there's as many as 25 different body types. And that's very hard literature to get a hold of. And when you simplify it down, it's still, it's a 5 elements, 5 times 5, 25. So there's 5 variations technically within each of them, which we can't get into all of them. But the basic idea is that if people can identify their general constitution, which elements they have proclivities toward, this puts us into Yangsheng, which is life nourishment, which is what I specialize in. If you can identify the constitutional pieces that you naturally carry, what that means is if you carry these things naturally, you are supposed to be using them. In Judeo-Christian, religion, they'll say, a God-given gift is meant to be used. So when we have a proclivity or a surplus of elements, we all have all the elements, we all have some of them, but some of us have a proclivity towards more fire, more earth, more water, or a combination of 2 or 3 where we're predominant. And once you can identify those things, life gets easier because you're leaning into the very thing that you are. So what I tell my clients is, if you ask a fish, a monkey, and an elephant to climb a tree, one of them is going to excel, the other 2 not so much. And we have to think of people and the elemental profiles that we carry the same way. And this is why feng shui is important. Which geography are you optimally geared for? What is the optimal style of eating? Low carbohydrate, high carbohydrate. What fits your body? Social dynamics, rhythms, all of these things fit into 5-element profiling. So in terms of your audience and what you guys are, hearing, would you like me to talk about general framing and like what the body styles kind of look like to a general degree? What would be most beneficial in terms of giving your audience, tools that they can play with?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, go ahead. You got about 9 minutes. So take it away. Whatever you feel, called to, and what you think is important to mention.
Great. We'll talk about it broad since we only have so much time. So when we look at the fire constitutions, these are people that thrive on social activity. Okay, people that have they laugh easily, they're warm, they have a lot of wrinkles on their face, and typically they are smaller framed. Okay, so like they'll be kind of small framed and maybe on the shorter side. This is fire. Now, a big person can have these as well, but these are just the general guidelines. When we look at the earthy people, these are a fleshier constitution. So people that have naturally bigger musculature, they're slightly rounder, but big, heavy musculature. This is usually the quality of earth. Slow and tender. They enjoy food and have house and home. So that's the earth profile in a general sense. The metal people are very meticulous, so very sharp-minded. The metal people have usually very good skeletal structures, so their skeletons are built well. Oftentimes beauty, okay, in the traditional sense, good-looking people is technically kind of aligned with metal. Metal has a lot of traits about clarity and spirit as well. So people that are drawn to these themes or that like clean environments, this is sort of the metal profile. When we look at watery types, we're looking at the Dalai Lamas, okay? Fleshy features, round faces, not necessarily big like earth people, but round in their constitution. Watery people are deep, slow, and heavy. So they like the deep thoughts. They like the deep processes. And so this is like the water element. And then when we look at the wood element, these are people who are very sinewy, very tight and very lean, okay, very athletic. Wood people have strong jaw lines. They like to get things done. They're very driven. So when we look at this and we kind of take these body builds, okay, just in a very loose sense, if we can identify that and say, all right, so I have a lot of fire and I've got some wood, let's just say as an example, then what we do is when they work with someone like me who specializes in Yangsheng, we say, okay, so let's look at the fire spectrum and the wood spectrum, the activities, the lifestyle, the diets, and the different ways that we can facilitate fire rhythms and wood rhythms into your life. And that's sort of how Yangsheng works. We have to identify what you are first, and then we say, okay, so let's look at those 2 spectrums, or maybe even 3, and start plugging those into your life and finding out where you're using them and where you're not. Because if you don't use the gift, it will make you sick. Overuse of a gift, overuse of Jing or our constitutional strength will make us sick, and underuse will also make us sick. So that's something that kind of gets lost, I think, in modern times, and even Chinese medicine. We have to use the gifts, but underuse and overuse will make you ill.
Right. So, abusing, something.
Yes.
So on the spectrum, then you have like abuse and possibly maybe microdose?
Yeah, like
on the
if
other
you think
side of the spectrum.
Yeah, on the other side. So if you think of like, we'll take like the CEO example, someone who is drinking too much coffee, working 80 hours a week, maybe, living a very just tumultuous lifestyle, maybe having too much sex, burning the candle from both ends. That's overuse, okay? They're naturally geared to have a lot of energy. They're using the gift, but they're also overusing it. Now, if that CEO who has that really smart mind to run a business and has that capacity to have for that vision is just sitting, say, working a very basic job at a desk by himself, that's not good either. That's underusing the gift. Like you're sitting on a winning lottery ticket. And so that's what I mean by underuse. You can't just, if you are gifted, and we're all gifted in some ways, but the area where you are gifted, you have to be using it. If you're not using it, it'll make you ill over time. Sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, but that's the takeaway.
Well, this definitely makes me want to spend more time with you and try to find out where my gifts are.
You got a lot. We'll talk about that. So that bridges us kind of into the herbs question, though, right?
Okay.
That was kind of a secondary piece to this.
Yep.
So dietary, eating, seasonal eating rhythms, this is part of the spectrum that we want to look at. The broad disclaimer I like to say with herbs is if you're going to work with herbs, and especially if you are remedying disease, okay, you have high blood pressure, you have a problem that you are dealing with, okay, what we call dis-ease, you really need to work with a practitioner, and that's to be safe and thorough. Herbs are a huge topic. And there are thousands of herbs used in Chinese medicine. So you want to work with a practitioner. Find a traditional Chinese medicine acupuncturist and herbalist, someone who ideally specializes in herbs. That's step one in terms of approaching herbs. Now, if you are in general good health, what I encourage people to do, especially after the age of 35, less so when they're younger and in good health, but after the age of 35, it's my contention that the vast majority of us should be on high quality tonic herbs and what we call the adaptogenic herbs specifically. So there's a company, which I don't get paid to mention their name. I just think they are top notch and I've used their product for years, but Ron Teagarden, who runs Dragon Herbs out of Southern California, he has farms in China all over, sustainable, ecologically sound, and he grows the herbs in the classical way. And that's important because how the plants are raised has a very real effect on how the plant behaves inside your body. And no one does it better than Ron Teagarden. So what I tell people who are in general good health, after age 35, our bodies are slowly starting to decline. They're starting to have little things crop up. We're not as fast or as sharp as we once were. And so the tonic herbs, the adaptogenic herbs, things like ashwagandha, ginseng, jiaogulan, hoshawu, there's a lot of different herbs that are tonifying in nature. But with tonic herbs in general, you want to take tonic herbs when you're in general good health. If you are sick and you have a cold and you take tonic herbs, Chinese medical theory says that it will tonify the sickness. So you have to be in good working order as you take these tonic herbs. But I think for the general overworked American population who is addicted to caffeine and stimulants, adaptogens are the key herbs that we should be looking at and talking to Ron Teagarden. If you call that company, they have acupuncturists and herbalists that work on staff over the phone who will actually work with you for free. Like, what are you buying? What do you need? And they help you get to where you need to be. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the direction I tell people to go with herbs is explore adaptogens. And just to give a quick definition to what adaptogen means, it means quite literally to adapt. So a person who has, say, an excess condition or a deficient condition, one person has excess, one person has deficient. When they take the appropriate adaptogenic herbs, the person that is deficient will be brought up and the person that is excess will be brought down. So they are stress regulating herbs and they're very intelligent and they're very smart. And most adaptogens are grown in really harsh environments. I'm talking flood, drought, heat, dryness, wetness. And that adaptation process where they have to survive in a very harsh climate yields a very strong medicine. And those adaptogens are something to look at. And it's a huge topic. Adaptogens are something you can research easily. But again, for the general population, I think people should be exploring tonic herbs.
Excellent. Great. Thanks so much.
You bet.
We're going to have to leave it there. We've got less than a minute.
Yeah, no worries.
I want to do a part 2 because, as I was saying, I want to get to plant medicine in this day and age and quickly let people know how they can reach you.
Easiest way is through my website, omnihealthandlifestyle.com, and that's OMNI. So omnihealthandlifestyle.com. You can find my YouTube channel under Gray Estrada, GrayEstrada. And then I have my lifestyle medicine podcast, which can be found on my YouTube channel as well as on iTunes. So that's the best way.
Gray, farewell for now, and we'll try to get you for part 2, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me, you guys. Take care.
Take care, man.
Bye.
And thanks for joining us today. To get in contact with us for any questions or comments, email talkingqi@gmail.com, talkingqi@gmail.com. Thank you and take care.